Hello everyone, this is Darren at GNB Productions, and today we'll be concluding our celebration of the Halloween season and our Chucky marathon with Season 1 of the hit TV show, Chucky. Yep, we have finally made it to the tail end of our Chucky marathon, and by the time this video comes out, the second season should be well over halfway through. And it's either a worthy follow-up or a messy disappointment. Season 1 of Chucky is about our titular doll after the events of Cult of Chucky, journeying to his hometown Hackensack, New Jersey, where he is taken in by a young Jake Wheeler, a middle schooler who lives with an abusive father, until Chucky decides to help him out in an attempt to make him his new killer apprentice. The first season is so much better than it had any damn right to be. The story and subsequent characters we follow throughout is really friggin' fun. This show brings in a plethora of new faces to the franchise, as well as old for the diehard fans. For the newbies, we have our main younger stars, Jake, Devin, Lexi, and Junior. Jake, our main protagonist, played greatly by Zachary Arthur, was a character that was really easy to sympathize with and get behind. With the story of his abusive dad, him being bullied at school, and his conflict with his sexuality, all topped off with a pretty good performance from Arthur, does a great job at getting you attached to his character. Seeing him venture down a brief, dark path being manipulated by Chucky, and the lengths that he's pushed to was really freaking good. Even though it does end up going nowhere, that is something I want to complain about later on. But overall, I really did like Jake as a character. Devin, on the other hand, not so much. Not to knock down the actor, because I know they're young, but he was probably the weakest performance-wise, and one of the characters I ended up caring the least about. The line direction and line delivery for me was kind of flat for him most of the time. It really felt that most of the time he just straight up wasn't there. Like he wasn't actually having these conversations with these characters. That's how flat it was for me. That also put a detriment on one of the most central plots in this season, that being Jake and Devin's relationship. Seeing them getting together didn't feel as satisfying as it should, because like I said, for the most part, it didn't feel like Devin was completely there, which didn't make the love that he had for Jake feel that natural. Scenes like their first kiss and that hallway scene are adorable in itself, but as a whole, it just wasn't executed as well to me. I really hope they improve on it in the second season now. Now, Lexi, played by who I think out of all the younger actors, she was probably the best. Which probably isn't a coincidence, since while this show was releasing, my friend reminded me that she was in another show I had seen. That being Daybreakers on Netflix. I honest to God can't remember how her performance was in that show, but I'm willing to bet that that experience helped, because I thought she was really good in this. She was great at playing the most despicable and grimy character who isn't Chucky, and I felt that she pulled it off. My problems with her, though, is that her character arc and her starting out as a maniacal bitch, only to turn a new leaf and consider Jake and Devin her family, was so half-assed in my opinion. The biggest thing that makes this not work is that they did too good of a job at making you absolutely despise her. I get they wanted to do that to show Jake having that push and trying to kill her, but I feel you could have done that without making her this downright cartoonishly evil. Junior as well was a character that was handled kind of flimsily. He's not even really that prominent, he's mainly in the background for a majority of the show until Chucky tries to move and make him his killer apprentice. Which was what I wanted to briefly discuss. Even though the remake came out first and did this, it might be my bias towards the OG series, but I love Chucky interacting with teenagers here. It's a clever take on the old formula of the first two films, and it's even more interesting with the big idea of him wanting to recruit them as a killer apprentice. I already had a feeling they wouldn't commit to doing it with Jake, main character and all, but it's when Chucky went around to manipulating Junior is when I got my hopes up, and was eventually disappointed. See, not only did they do a poor job at us buying that Junior can be a killer, they also threw in a redemption arc that didn't feel earned. Because he doesn't show any reason to have that level of violence, and no, his mom dying and dad being a dick doesn't justify it. It just didn't feel natural, and yeah, his redemption didn't feel earned either because we didn't see enough of him as a killer to even get behind it. I feel the need to preface that I don't hate any of these characters. It's just that outside of Jake, I felt the writing choices and general execution on them was just kinda iffy. Other than the youngins, we have a personal standout for me being Devin Sawa playing Logan and Lucas Wheeler, Jake's dad and Junior's dad. I felt he did pretty decently for the one episode we saw of Jake's dad, and we would periodically saw him as Junior's dad. Although that being said, I am looking forward to seeing his return in Season 2. Bree and as well as Devin's mom are a problem that I'll go into later, but as a whole, these new characters are all pretty enjoyable for me. Now for our legacy characters. Nika, who last time we saw being possessed by the claw-handed Chucky and Cult, accompanying her is Tiffany. While we also have Andy Barkley and making her grand return to the franchise, Christina Lease as Kyle. So these guys were used pretty sparingly, and while I saw some others have an issue with this, I for the most part didn't really mind. Since this story is mainly about the kids in Hackensack, but an issue I have is that it was only Andy and Kyle I felt got the worst treatment. Now them being used sparingly wasn't an issue, but outside of that badass introduction where they shoot up the claw-handed Chucky, they didn't do literally anything until the finale. It also doesn't help that their performances just wasn't all that. Well, Christina Lease, for the little we got of her, I still felt did a good job at stepping back into the Kyle role. My biggest problem is with Andy. See, this is what I was referring to in the past few videos of me saying I had a lot of shit to talk regarding Alex Vincent's performance. Considering we have more of him in this than in Cult, I can say that in my opinion, Vincent's performance was just not really good in this. He sounds so drab and emotionless a majority of the time. And before anyone says that it was intentional because Andy has PTSD, I'm sorry, but if that is something that he intentionally was going for, congrats, you succeeded on sounding boring as shit. It's especially apparent when there are lines like this.
What'd you learn?
He screams the loudest at fire. Those screams are my favorite.
That are meant to come off as dramatic or cool or whatever they were going for, but came across as just try-hard edge that did not work well. And Kyle, I felt, was probably handled with the most disrespect, because not only was she barely used, her fate at the end of the season was just handled in such an unnecessarily strange way. Like, it's left up in arms if Kyle is dead or not, which leads to me talking about another thing, but we'll get into that later. Like, for proper context, in a scene where Andy and Kyle make it to Chucky's old home, where Devin has been kidnapped, Tiffany, before leaving him there, planted a bomb at the front door. Andy went through the back and Kyle went through the front, unknowingly setting off the bomb. Devin made it out, somehow unscathed. Andy made it out as well, but the story for some reason leaves it ambiguous if Kyle is even dead. Like, we see one of her gloved hands from behind a tree, so it begs the question of why hide her if she's alive, and if she's dead, which is very unlikely, then her character was just a complete waste. Anyway, alongside Andy and Kyle, we have the return of Tiffany and Nika, the latter of which by far has to be the best performer in this entire season. The shit that Fiona Dorff is tasked to do in this show would be damn near impossible to nail, but she does it almost perfectly. For context, after the events of Cult, the Chucky that possessed Nika is for some reason having trouble keeping himself conscious when in contact with blood. Yeah, I'll touch on that shit later. So it's kind of a back and forth on whoever is in the driver's seat, and it is so good. The biggest thing I have to commemorate Fiona for is the layer of performances she has to put on. Like, in some scenes, she's playing Nika, but in others, she's playing Chucky in Nika's body. And then there are instances where she's playing Nika who's pretending to be Chucky, and then in other scenes, she's playing Chucky who's pretending to be Nika, and do you see why I simp for this woman? Although, this show does something to Nika that even a whole year later, after the season is done, I'm still split on. So spoilers, as if it matters at this point in the video, but spoilers? After dealing with the whole Chucky and Nika switching in and out thing, as well as Chucky trying to kill Tiff, again, and her growing fond of Nika, came to a compromise to stop Chucky from getting in the way. And that compromise was to literally cut all of Nika's arms and legs off. On one hand, I admire and respect that they had the balls to go that crazy and that dark, but on the other hand, My girl hasn't known a moment of peace since she came into this franchise. And now you do this? Mancini, you really are one sick son of a bitch. Anyway, Tiffany is in full force this season, and I think she was pretty good. Except for like the last 2 episodes where she was just kind of used as comic relief, but as a whole, I really did enjoy her this season. But there is something that did bother me. Now again, a highlight in her story is her getting tired of Chucky's shit and breaking up with him. But this is probably the worst instance of this, because not only is this the 3rd time that this has happened, so it kind of feels redundant at this point to do it again. But even after she breaks things off, she still kind of tries to continue on with Chucky's evil plan, and even gets pissed when Andy seemingly foils it. So, yeah, kind of weird. Tiffany, I overall enjoyed this season. Jennifer Tilly, as always, does a pretty good job. Then we have the title character himself, Chucky. And I'm just going to cut to the chase and say this is the best Chucky has ever been, best Chucky has ever looked, best Chucky has ever sounded. This show literally just perfected Chucky. I love that the show as well gave us the opportunity to get a deeper dive into Chucky's past. When it was announced we'd be going through the origin of Chucky, I was intrigued but concerned. Mainly because I thought they'd go the generic bully victim turned psycho killer route, but no. It's just revealed that Charles from the get-go was just always a fucked up individual. I also like that it still leaves a bit of intrigue that doesn't need to be further explored. And I love going through his entire life history, but the flashbacks started to lose me a little after Tiffany was introduced. And it didn't help that the lip syncing with Jennifer Tilly's voiceover was a tad wonky.
Want to order a pizza?
I think that's a great idea.
Nag, 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 nag. Tip.
When was the last time that you took me out for a nice dinner and a murder?
But as a whole, this being a Chucky TV show, they did an amazing job with him, and I'm so hyped to see more of this little ginger fuck in season 2. Okay, characters aside, this show offers a lot in terms of visual style. I love the direction, lighting, and color that is used throughout. It just looks so freaking good. And especially the episode that was in the hospital. Seriously, no hospital has any right looking this goddamn pretty. The visual and practical effects as well are fantastic. The animatronic work on the doll is to me the best they've ever been, as well as effects with all the kills being amazing. They ain't all perfect, but when they get good, they get really freaking good. This show as well has a pretty well balanced tone. It has a healthy mix of fun, wacky shit, as well as intense horror. But it also does a pretty decent job with drama and character growth. For the most part. Yeah, something I've been putting off for a while is that, like Cult, there is just a lot of weird and unexplained shit that I can't really get off my mind. While I do think they have a good handle with small character drama like with Junior's mom, and character growth like with Devin's mom, this show also has a knack for having plot lines that go on for far too long, or some that end up literally going nowhere. For example, Junior's mom, Bree, in the first episode is seen having a sneaky little convo on the phone that one would believe is insinuating that she's having an affair. Cut to like 3, maybe 4 episodes later, to where it's just plainly revealed that she has cancer. And before we have any real time to digest or care about that info, Chucky just up and kills her. If they introduced that element earlier instead of dragging it out for an unnecessary amount of time, we could have had more time to actually care and feel bad about her death, further making Chucky seem like this diabolical little shit. But I guess not. Or with Devin's mom, where she starts to suspect Jake is behind all the Chucky killings, but she eventually comes around to trust him through learning about Devin liking him. And before they do anything interesting with it, she just up and frickin' dies. Why? What was the point? Not only that, but there are also just generally a bunch of awkward moments in the show. Not really bad, just very weird. Like Chucky when he was about to kill Lexi, but then he just didn't for some reason. We never get a proper explanation on how Chucky and Nika keep switching back and forth. Like, the getting knocked out part and regaining consciousness, I kinda get, but they never explain why whenever they come in contact with blood triggers the switch up. And Chucky's apparent evil plan throughout this season was just kind of weirdly explained. It's just kind of randomly alluded to that he needed one of these kids to kill so that it can complete a voodoo spell to possess an army of Chucky dolls at once. This is something I hate that some shows do, where they save all the important shit for the finale where it barely has any room to breathe. I feel if this element of the story was introduced earlier, it would give us a bit more drama and intensity to build up with the anticipation of if he gets a kid to kill, we're all pretty much fucked. Yeah, if it wasn't apparent already in this video, most of my gripes and complaints from the show come from its very awkward finale. Like I mentioned in my cult video, I don't like when an ending to a story serves as a shameless tease to a future installment, because shit just ends up feeling incomplete as a result. Like, with this finale, everything in it was just very poorly handled. The stuff with Kyle and Andy, the shit with Tiffany, the very strange movie theater massacre where Chucky's just rolling around stabbing people in the ass and they miraculously die. For some reason. And yeah, just as a whole, really left this season feeling a little incomplete. Alright, so even though I've been fairly negative for a portion of this video, I still cannot recommend this show enough. Despite its flaws, Chucky Season 1 has a really good cast of characters who all delivered pretty decent to good performances, has a well-balanced tone that offers entertainment for those fond of the comedic and horror side of the franchise, all with a great soundtrack as well as amazing practical and VFX, all make Chucky Season 1, in my opinion, a very worthy watch. Anyway, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also be sure to like and subscribe. This is Darren at GNB Productions, and take care.